I hadn't seen my grandfather in nearly 15 years when the letter arrived. It was thin, yellowed at the edges, like it had been waiting for the right time to find me. No return address, just my name, printed in his old-fashioned cursive. Inside was a single line, written in ink that had slightly faded. "The cottage is yours now. You'll know what to do." A week later, I was driving down a winding road in northern Pennsylvania, hemmed in by trees still bare from winter. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that blur the line between day and dusk. My grandfather's cottage sat at the end of a gravel lane that looked like it hadn't been driven on in years. The mailbox, rusted and leaning, still bore his name, J.H. Whitmore. As I stepped out of the car, a cold wind brushed against my face, and I pulled my coat tighter. The cottage stood before me, small, sagging, its wooden porch warped and flaking paint like peeling skin. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt waiting. I was 29, a city girl through and through. I'd grown up with concrete under my feet and a skyline outside my window. My grandfather had been the opposite, a quiet man who preferred the company of books and birds to people. He'd lived alone since my grandmother died, tucked away in this cabin in the woods, sending birthday cards written on a typewriter and disappearing from our lives like mist. When I was young, I used to spend summers here. But one year, I stopped, and I never came back. Until now. I pushed open the front door, half expecting it to creak like something out of an old ghost story. It didn't. It swung inward, silently, like it had been oiled just yesterday. Inside, the air smelled like cedar, mothballs, and something older. Something musty and sweet, like dried flowers and thyme. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of gray light pouring through the windows. The furniture was all still there. A faded blue armchair by the fireplace, a wooden clock on the mantel, its hands frozen at 4:17. Books stacked on every surface, titles about folklore, nature, and obscure history. A fire poker rested by the hearth, untouched. I wandered through the room slowly, my footsteps muffled by worn rugs. Everything was as I remembered, and yet not. The kitchen held plates with tiny hand-painted birds. The pantry was empty, save for a single tin of loose-leaf tea and a glass jar filled with marbles. My grandfather's bedroom was sparse, just a bed, a dresser, and a photograph on the wall of a woman I didn't recognize. But the room that stopped me was the study. I remembered it vaguely from childhood, a place I wasn't allowed to go. My grandfather had always kept it locked. But now, the door creaked open easily. It was dark inside, the only light coming from a small, circular window near the ceiling. Dust clung to the shelves like a second skin. The desk was massive, carved from oak, and on it sat a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. Beside it, a small brass key. I picked up the key, and my heart started to race. I didn't know why. It was just a key, tiny, delicate, cold against my palm. But something about it felt deliberate. I opened the journal. The first page was blank. So was the second. But on the third, in the same handwriting from the letter, was a single line. Some things live longer than memory. I don't know how long I stood there, reading that sentence over and over. The room was so still, it felt like it was holding its breath. Outside, the wind picked up. The house groaned, and I realized something strange. There were no mirrors in the entire cottage, not one. I didn't sleep that first night. I tried. I lay on the old mattress in my grandfather's room, listening to the wind slide around the house like it was searching for a way in. But my thoughts kept circling back to that line in the journal. Some things live longer than memory. What did it mean? Why leave that and nothing else? Why now? By sunrise, I was already back in the study. The leather-bound journal hadn't moved. The little brass key sat next to it, waiting. I turned it over in my hand. It was too small for a door, maybe a drawer or a box. I started opening everything I could, the desk drawers, cabinets, shelves. Most were empty or filled with old fountain pens, yellowing paper, and brittle feathers that might have once been bookmarks. Then I noticed something. Behind the desk, a shelf of books sat deeper into the wall than the others. The edges of the surrounding shelves were flush, but this one was recessed. Not by much, maybe 2 inches, but enough to feel off. I reached forward and tapped it. Hollow. I ran my fingers along the seams. One corner felt looser than the rest. I pressed down, and the whole section of shelving shifted with a dull click. A hidden compartment. Inside was a wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, dark with age and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Circles, lines intersecting at odd angles. Some of it looked mathematical. Some of it felt almost religious. The key slid in perfectly. The lock popped open with a quiet snap. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a bundle of folded cloth, soft and thin like old linen. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing what looked like a photograph, but not like any I'd ever seen. It was printed on heavy textured paper, and the image was unsettling. It showed the cottage, years ago, but in place of the front window, there was a dark smear, like something had been caught mid-movement and blurred. A figure, maybe, or a shadow. The trees around the house looked taller, wilder, almost like they were leaning in. Beneath the photo was another note, handwritten and barely legible. If you see her, don't speak. That was it. I set the box down and stood up too quickly, knocking my knee against the desk. My skin prickled. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, even though the room was empty. I closed the box, locked it, and backed away. Later that day, while exploring the attic, I found something even stranger. It was hidden beneath a sheet of plywood, nailed down but loose at the edges. I pried it up and discovered a small crawl space, no bigger than a coffin. Inside was a child's rocking horse, covered in cobwebs. It creaked slightly as I touched it. Beside it, scrawled onto the wall in pencil, dozens of names, written over and over again. Some were crossed out, others were circled. One name was mine. I didn't write it. I went downstairs in a daze, trying to make sense of it all. Why would my grandfather hide these things? What did they mean? And more importantly, what exactly had he been trying to protect me from? That night, I lit a fire in the hearth, hoping the warmth would push back whatever chill had settled in my bones. The flames flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I sat in the armchair, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the photograph. The longer I looked, the more certain I became. The smear in the window, it had a shape, not a blur. A face. Just as the fire began to die, I heard something upstairs. 3 slow, deliberate footsteps, then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just listened, heart pounding as the quiet stretched on like a held breath. Eventually, I stood and climbed the stairs, one step at a time. The hallway was dark, lit only by the weak glow from my phone. Every door was closed, except the one to the attic. It was open a crack. I hadn't left it that way. I didn't go in. Not that night. Instead, I returned to the study, locked the door, and sat at the desk with the journal and the key. The journal still held blank pages, but when I turned to the final one, a new message had appeared. She's awake now. The next morning I stood at the window, staring out at the woods behind the cottage. The sky was slate gray again, and the trees were still, their branches bare and twisted like reaching hands. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph, saw the smear in the window take shape, becoming clearer, more human. And I kept hearing the words written in the journal. She's awake now. Who was she? I stepped outside, wrapping my coat tight against the cold. The air had that sharp, metallic scent that comes before a storm. The woods stretched back for miles, quiet and untouched, except for a narrow trail leading into the trees. I remembered that trail from when I was a kid. Grandpa used to take me on walks there, though never far. He always turned us around after just a few minutes, no matter how much I begged to go deeper. I decided to follow it. Dead leaves crackled beneath my boots. The deeper I went, the colder it felt, as if the forest held its own temperature. The air grew stiller, heavier. I walked for maybe 10 minutes before I saw something that stopped me cold. Carved into the trunk of a tall oak tree was a symbol, the same symbol that had been etched into the wooden box in the study. A circle with intersecting lines. It hadn't faded with age. The cut looked fresh. I turned to leave, heart pounding, and that's when I saw her. Just for a second. A figure, standing far off between the trees. She was still, watching. I couldn't make out her face, only that her dress looked old-fashioned, like something from a century ago. Long sleeves, high collar, pale fabric that fluttered, even though there was no wind. I blinked, and she was gone. Back at the cottage, I locked every door and closed every curtain. I told myself I'd imagined it. The forest was playing tricks on me. I was tired. My mind was working overtime. But the fear in my chest wouldn't go away. Later that afternoon, I found another message in the journal. The pages were still mostly blank, but now, halfway through, "Don't let her in." I stared at it. My hands tremba. I hadn't written it. No one else was here. I flipped through the rest of the book, still blank. Then I noticed something new. Tucked between 2 pages was an old newspaper clipping, brittle and yellowed. The headline read, "Local Girl Missing in Whitmore Woods, 1936. My heart sank. Whitmore. My grandfather's name. The article was short, but it told the story of a 9-year-old girl named Clara Dempsey who vanished while playing near a creek that ran through the woods behind the cottage. She was never found. The last person to see her? A man named Joseph Whitmore. My grandfather. I sat in silence, reading the clipping over and over. He never mentioned anything like this. No one in my family had. Was this what he'd been hiding? That night, I couldn't stay inside. I paced the floor, then stepped onto the porch, needing air. The wind had picked up again, dry leaves scraping across the steps like whispers. The woods were pitch black. I stood there, staring into the dark, and that's when I saw it. A light, not from the sky or a flashlight. It was a faint glow, bluish-white, hovering between the trees, moving. It floated like it had a purpose, weaving slowly through the trunks until it reached the edge of the tree line. Then it stopped, and behind it, just visible in the darkness, was her. The same figure, closer now, still unmoving, still watching. I stepped back inside and slammed the door. Something scratched at the wood almost instantly. A single, slow scrape, like fingernails. Then nothing. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, just silence. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the armchair, gripping the journal like a shield. Every now and then, I thought I saw something move outside the window, but I never looked long enough to be sure. When the sun finally rose, pale and weak through the clouds, I knew one thing for certain. I had to find out the truth. Not just about my grandfather, but about her. Who she was, why she was still here, and what exactly she wanted from me. I spent most of the next day in the study, determined to find something, anything, that would make sense of what was happening. The journal still sat open where I'd left it. The warning was burned into my mind. Don't let her in. But who was she? Clara Dempsey, the missing girl from the newspaper. Was it her I'd seen in the woods? The pale dress, the silence, the watching. It didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a message, or a memory that didn't belong to me. I picked up the journal again, flipping through every page, running my fingers along the seams. I was about to set it down when I felt something strange near the back cover, a ridge under the lining. Carefully, I peeled it away. Inside, folded tight and pressed flat, were several thin, brittle pages, hidden, written in my grandfather's handwriting, but shakier, more frantic. The entries were dated. Most were from 1947, a full decade after Clara disappeared. The first one read, "She came to the window again. I told her I was sorry, but she doesn't want forgiveness. She wants the promise kept." The next few entries were worse, rambling, disjointed. "She doesn't knock anymore. The woods go quiet when she's near. Even the crows won't speak. I hear her humming, the same tune, over and over. The others never stayed long enough to see her, but I have. And then, near the end, one final entry, scrawled almost illegibly, "It wasn't supposed to be me." I sat back in the chair, heart thudding in my chest. My grandfather, who I remembered as kind, gentle, patient, had been unraveling for decades, and yet part of me wondered, was it madness? Or was it guilt? There were no more answers in the journal, but the mention of a promise kept nagging at me. What promise? I remembered the attic, the crawl space, the names. I went back up there, flashlight in hand, ducking beneath the low beams and peeling insulation. The air was dry and cold. The rocking horse hadn't moved, but something felt different, like the silence was heavier now. I ran my fingers over the wall again, reading each name. Some were familiar, distant cousins or old family names I'd heard in passing. Others meant nothing to me. But near the corner, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small square panel cut into the floorboards, barely visible, its edges smudged with dust. I pried it open and found a compartment, just large enough to hold a box. Not the carved one from the study. This one was plain, wooden, unmarked. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all unopened, all addressed to one name, Clara Dempsey. Each envelope was dated, one every year, starting from 1937 all the way to 1975. None had been sent. All were sealed. I opened one. "Clara, I know it's not enough. I see you sometimes. I see what you've become. I didn't mean to forget. But time moved on. People forget. I didn't keep the promise, but I never stopped regretting it." Most of the letters were like that. Apologies, confessions, pleas for peace. But no one screamed. No alarms sounded. Just humming. Low. Endless. Like it had been waiting for years to be heard. They said the fire was electrical, that the wiring was old, unstable, that it was lucky I wasn't inside when it happened. I didn't correct them. I never told them about the girl in the woods, or the mirror, or the letters. I took nothing with me from that place, not even the journal. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the humming again, just under the silence. And when I look into mirrors, I take a step back. Because once, just once, I saw something standing behind me. A girl in a pale dress, mouth open, eyes empty, and I swear she whispered, "You promised." But no one screamed. No alarms sounded. Just humming. Low, endless, like it had been waiting for years to be heard. They said the fire was electrical, that the wiring was old, unstable, that it was lucky I wasn't inside when it happened. I didn't correct them. I never told them about the girl in the woods, or the mirror, or the letters. I took nothing with me from that place, not even the journal. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the humming again, just under the silence. And when I look into mirrors, I take a step back, because once, just once, I saw something standing behind me, a girl in a pale dress, mouth open, eyes empty, and I swear she whispered, "You promised." But no one screamed, no alarms sounded, just humming, low, endless, like it had been waiting for years to be heard. They said the fire was electrical, that the wiring was old, unstable, that it was lucky I wasn't inside when it happened. I didn't correct them. I never told them about the girl in the woods, or the mirror, or the letters. I took nothing with me from that place, not even the journal, but sometimes, late at night, I hear the humming again, just under the silence, and when I look into mirrors, I take a step back, because once, just once, I saw something standing behind me, a girl in a pale dress, mouth open, eyes empty, and I swear she whispered, "You promised."